barbarous.
No, but it comes from there.
I
Where does the word
will
come
look-
from?
we
There's
even
quotes.
I'll check in the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, unabridged,
Yeah, on the bridge.
and it should give us the history of it. I don't know if I can get it on my iPhone. But no, thank you for drawing that, because that's a whole expansion, direction to go in, which I hadn't thought of.
I thought you were following their narrative, you were following their diction that they used in the 18th century. So
Right.
that could be also pejorative.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that, it's not her position, that was how I took it.
I would put quotes.
But then I will quote
Today.
throughout,
Yes.
throughout the.
Yes. Or
Yeah.
it deserves a footnote or something.
Um,
Otherwise it's not,
You'll
today
see
it's
if
not
you can find
understandable.
something.
Yeah,
Our brains.
yeah, right, I tend to do that. Other question or comment or remark?
How did, in French, how was North Africa referenced in the 18th century? Does anyone know? I'm checking my Google, I'm Googling it.
Yeah, in Chinese, we call people at the margin, man. Later on, it is absolutely pejorative, but in the beginning, it is not just an indication of a location or geographical differences. But, right, but, yeah. But it could be also a marker for, to differentiate people in the center and people at the margin. So it already could be a hierarchical label. Yeah.
The term derives from the Berber people of North Africa, from Greek, from the ancient Greek, which I'm not going to read,
This is why.
literally meaning barbarians, and the Arabic barbar, meaning barbaric. Okay, so much to play with there. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Question or comment? Feel free to, because the second half will be Haitian Revolution, a different direction. So we can talk about this issue. Ray? No? Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think your account of these your analysis of these texts are just fascinating, and I'm curious about how, like, the two texts that you mentioned at in the first half are like accounts of actual sailors who were captured as slaves and enslaved in North Africa, whereas the text by, what was his name, Royal Tyler, is a fictional.
It's fictional, and it's basically an anti-slavery tract.
Yeah. So I'm curious about why the accounts of the accounts of actual people who were captured seem not to notice the parallel that is so crucial to the debunking of the internal conflict that you mentioned within this within the liberalism of this newfound republic, whereas the fictional account was able to point that out. And what do you think about the what was the situation at that time between the difference between fictional text and these actual records that produce this difference in consciousness?
It's a puzzling relationship, and I've begun to explore it. I'm sorry. It's a puzzling.
Put on it's not on.
Oh, it's not on. Thank you. It's a puzzling relationship for two reasons. For the chronological reason that Tyler's fiction precedes the closest, a very strong parallel with a printed text, with a actual narrative. And that is something I think one needs to really struggle with and try to puzzle out. And I try somewhat of a psychological explanation of why it might have been too painful, too destabilizing for actually the captives to say, we were treated just like a black slave. That is, I think, and remember that at least some of them, Ray, for example, is quite a Jeffersonian, and one of the things you were not supposed to criticize in the United States in the 1790s if you were a Jeffersonian was slavery. You're not supposed to draw that connection. Or you can maybe, I'll talk about this in a few minutes, you can for maybe a week or so, but after that, you have to drop it. It's too politically dangerous. It was sort of like 20 years ago, if you were a Democrat, you couldn't advocate for gun control. Increasing the public debt to do social welfare legislation. And these were things that were politically too costly to undertake at that time. But I think more psychologically, it was drawing too. If you've just been enslaved, you've just gone through what had to have been a really severe post-traumatic stress situation, where you're enslaved, you're beaten, your world is turned upside down, and it takes your country forever to raise money they're being held for ransom. It's an economic situation. It's not, I don't think, a particularly racial one on the part of the North African states. They just want money from anyone. So they're capturing the Portuguese, they're capturing, and all the European nations at one point or another make treaties with them saying, we will pay you a yearly stipend, don't take our people. But the United States is too principled to do that, so, they pay no ransom. We still don't, theoretically. And so these people are, but they do pay the ransom, but it takes them a long time to do that because they don't have a fiscal infrastructure and they don't have a diplomatic infrastructure. So they have to find a merchant who will, under his own name, borrow the money from some banker somewhere in England or in the Barbary Coast or wherever it is, and raise the money, and then he will be paid back by the United States government, and it takes years. It's sort of, you don't realize how new this country is. It's hard to realize how new, that there's no infrastructure, no governmental infrastructure. The Senate meets in a room not much bigger than this, for example. There are 13 times 26 people is the U.S. Senate in its founding. So we're dealing in peanuts at this point. And so that's part of the situation. So there's a pragmatic situation, but there's, I think, a very deep psychological component, and then there's the politics of it. Which, I'll discuss the Republican politics when we start again. But I think I have to do more with trying to tease out why they don't say, oh my God. Because there is an anti-slavery rhetoric that does exist that they could draw upon. So we have to figure out why it's too threatening for them to do that. And so if anyone has ideas on that, I would love them. Please.
Thank you, Carol. I apologize for coming
We
late.
understand. We have a careless wife, but we can give her.
No, I was looking at your quote about the anthropological symbolic nature of jokes. Mary Douglas, and we really is it legitimate to make comic operas or anything comic or jokes about such a serious situation, such a serious issue as slavery, etc., etc. But then I'm thinking about more modern times, and not only modern times, I'm even quoting modern times, the film by Charlie Chaplin, which is very much a joke.
Yes.
And it's a very serious joke.
Yes.
And it was understood a very serious joke, the whole work of Charlie Chaplin, because he was not so much appreciated during McCarthy's times. And we can look also at the anti-Soviet jokes in Stalin's period,
Exactly.
which could well take you to Siberia one could also think about Ken Loach's films today, which have a sweet and sour kind of sense, but do contain many jokes, and these jokes
Yeah.
are taken seriously. So, what is your view about this legitimacy of
Yeah. Well, I think all,
treating serious situations in comic operas or comic films?
well, political humor, I think, rests upon the nature of political humor is to, draw out the absurdity, the horror of the situation through humor. I mean, we have that phrase, gallows humor. So, I'm a great fan of Mary Douglas. I like her work very much. I'm sad to say she doesn't like mine very much, but I forgive her. But I like that what she does with humor. Are you still?
No, but she seems to say that it's not really, it accelerates the sense of freedom, but is not really subversive. It's not anti-system. And I believe it can be very much anti-system.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not even sure she's really saying that. Remember, I'll have to read her again. I think she's saying that in and of itself it doesn't change, but it does give you the sense of freedom, which then is implanted in you. I'm not sure she's really saying it isn't transformative, or it isn't transgressive. I'll send you the reference to it, and we can both read it together. We'll parse it together. It appeared in the 1960s in a British anthropological journal called Man. So I actually haven't read it for a while. So, but I will think about this. But I certainly didn't mean it that way. And in fact, in this paper I say, is this possibility lingering a little bit too long in people's imagination?
Other comment or question? Yeah, please.
It's well, it's a rather complicated matter, so I'll try to make it clear, but I'm not sure that I will succeed in doing it. So, for me, what you are talking of in the last part of your talk, it's an operation. I call it, let's say, mental or intellectual operation, which consists in talking to an audience or whatever, and saying, look at what we are doing to some people, that is enslaving people, enslaving the blacks, but through the eyes of others, and then taking, let's say, the reverse angle. So, and making people think about what they are doing or what they have to feel responsible for in a way or another, by showing that this could happen to us and this can happen to us. Okay, so I think that usually this operation, which is quite interesting, that is, okay, reversing, taking the risk, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because people respond or react by saying, but no, it has nothing in common. In that case, no, we are white, they are black. It has nothing in common. And I would like to give you an example of that. When the IS, Islamic State, was expanding, one day they shot down a plane, a Syrian plane from the Syrian air force, and took and captured the pilot. They put the guy in a cage
And burnt him.
You remember that?
Oh, yes, very well.
They didn't do it, they did it in purpose in order to make this operation. That is to say, not only to the Syrian regime, but basically to the West, look at what you are doing when you are bombing our camps, villages, that is burning our children, the people around, the women, etc. This is exactly what you are doing, bombing. This is the result, what we did to the guy. But this, nobody could understand it in the West or wherever, because the only thing we saw, I mean, as Western audience, is that these people are barbarians.
Yeah.
No, and that's the end of it. So this is why I say this beautiful operation usually does not work. Would you agree with that? Or?
Well, this is really, you're giving an answer to Ray's question then. That, well, I would say to this, you have to be more didactic. If you're doing something like this, and I don't know, it may simply be that we didn't cover ISIS reporting, but I don't remember their saying, this is what you do to our children. Well, it did not hit the New York press. And I hate to sound like Donald Trump, they sometimes engage in misrepresentation. So you have to be very clear, I think, when you're engaging in this kind of inversion, that you understand. And I think it's very difficult because people don't like to make the effort to think in terms of synecdoches or in terms of like what I was talking in terms on Monday, where the young Irish girl stands for the nation, an immigrant nation. So it's an effort, but it's an effort. So yeah, I think this is a very good answer also to Ray's question, and helps. I was doing it a psychological approach, but I think this is nothing like logic. Thank you. So you have your answer now.
Thank you. Have another question?
I'm going to make notes of this so I remember. Go to Barbary and
If not, then we could take a break.
yes.
Take a 15-20 minutes break, and then we'll come back for the second part. Yes.